Hi, I'm Dr. Wendy Bohan and I'm an earthquake geologist. I'm doing a video series on earthquakes in all 50 states, and today's state is Georgia. Now, most earthquakes in Georgia happen in the northern part of the state. That's part of the eastern Tennessee seismic zone, which is a belt of kind of more earthquake activity. So Georgia can be shaken by earthquakes that happen within its own borders or earthquakes that happen outside of Georgia. For instance, people in Georgia felt the series of earthquakes that happened in the New Madrid seismic zone in 1811 and 1812. Also, there was damage and even a death in Georgia due to the 1886 Charleston earthquake. So in Savannah, one woman died and there were some injuries reported in that area, partially because people were jumping out of the upper windows in the upper stories of buildings. Like, that's not the recommended action. Don't do that. There was also a lot of damage in Augusta. More than 1,000 chimneys were damaged. And on the Tybee Island light station, the lighthouse there was cracked in the middle, and the 1-ton lens that they used in the lighthouse was moved more than 1.5 inches due to the earthquake shaking. So earthquakes happen in Georgia, a couple earthquakes every year. But if we think about the past earthquake history of Georgia, we have to introduce a new term called shaking intensity. So every earthquake has one magnitude. That's the amount of energy that's released during the earthquake. But every earthquake can generate lots of different intensities of shaking on the surface. And we can talk about that in terms of what people feel or how much damage there was, usually to human structures and infrastructure. And to measure shaking intensity, we use something called the modified Mercalli intensity scale. You can see it over here. And that is marked by both numbers and colors. So it goes from like 1 to 12. 1 is not experiencing any shaking, whereas 12 is extreme shaking. Now, a modified Mercalli intensity of 5 is about when people or buildings would start to really experience cracks, things like that. So damage starts to occur around the intensity 5. Now, this is important because some of the older earthquakes in Georgia aren't really reported in terms of their magnitude. They're reported in terms of what people experienced, which makes a lot of sense because there weren't a lot of seismometers in the world at that point. So let's go back in time. June 17th, 1872, there was an earthquake that happened in Milledgeville, and that generated shaking of about intensity 5. So that's around when you could expect damage to start happening. November 1st, 1875, there was an earthquake that occurred near the South Carolina border that generated intensity 6 shaking. That earthquake was felt over more than 25,000 square miles. That's a lot. On March 5th, 1916, there was an earthquake that happened 30 miles, I always want to say kilometers, but we have to report these in miles because US, 30 miles southeast of Atlanta. And that was felt in North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, Tennessee, over more than 50,000 square miles. But, earthquakes continue to happen. There was a magnitude 4.3 in Lincoln County in 1974. There was a magnitude of 4.2 in Whitfield County in 1984. There was a magnitude 3.9 relatively recently. So lots of earthquakes are happening in Georgia, even though you may not feel them and even though you may not hear about them. So Georgia is earthquake country. What do you do if you feel earthquake shaking? You do not jump out of a window. No, drop down to the ground, take cover underneath a sturdy object, and hold on until all the shaking has stopped. Don't be scared. Be prepared.